Aileen Wuornos, a killer or a victim? The truth remains shrouded in mystery, and her story continues to captivate and disturb, leaving us with more questions than answers. Aileen Wuornos was not a typical criminal. Her story was one of pain, desperation, and survival. Born on February 29, 1956, in Troy, Michigan, Aileen's life was plagued with abuse and tragedy. Her mother abandoned her when she was just a baby, and her father, a convicted child rapist, was never a part of her life. Aileen was raised by her grandparents, but her teenage years were marked by a series of violent and emotional experiences. By the time she was in her 20s, Aileen had turned to sex work in order to survive. Her body became the battleground, both a means of survival and a site of profound exploitation. At times, she spoke of the abuse she endured from men, feeling trapped in a cycle of violence that ultimately shaped her path. Then, in 1989, something inside her snapped. She met Tyria Moore, a hotel maid in Daytona Beach. They quickly became lovers, and soon, Aileen was supporting their life together by engaging in sex work, picking up men off the side of the road. Little did anyone know, this seemingly innocent relationship would be the catalyst for a deadly series of murders. The first murder happened on December 1st, 1989. Aileen Wuornos picked up Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner. She was working as a prostitute, offering sex to him in exchange for money. But as the two drove into the woods off Highway 19 in Florida, the situation took a violent turn. Wuornos would later claim that Mallory attempted to rape her, and she shot him in self-defense. This would be the first of 7 murders. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos killed 7 men in total, each one shot at point-blank range. The victims were all men who had solicited sex from her, and each time, Wuornos claimed that she was acting in self-defense, fearing for her life as they tried to assault her. The details of each murder were eerily similar. She picked them up as part of her sex work, lured them into secluded areas, and then shot them, leaving them for dead. With each victim, she took the man's belongings, often stealing money and valuables. This gruesome pattern continued over a span of several months, each time her desperation growing and her actions becoming more brazen. Aileen's partner, Tyria Moore, was unaware of the full extent of the murders. It wasn't until Wuornos was arrested in January 1991 that the truth would come out. Detectives first became suspicious of Wuornos when the body of Richard Mallory was discovered on December 13, 1989. Mallory had been shot multiple times in the chest, and his car was missing. As the bodies of more men were discovered, each with similar patterns, shot execution style and left in isolated areas, investigators knew they were dealing with a serial killer. The breakthrough came when Wuornos was pulled over for a traffic stop in January 1991. Police discovered a gun in her possession, which linked her to the killings. Through further investigation, they found out that Wuornos had been working as a prostitute, and her victims had all been men who had paid for sex. At the time of her arrest, Wuornos claimed that the men she killed had attempted to rape her, and that she had acted in self-defense. She was charged with 6 of the 7 murders. The police had their suspect, but they didn't have enough physical evidence to tie her directly to the murders. That changed when Wuornos' own confessions came to light. In a series of interviews, she detailed how she killed each man, describing their last moments with disturbing clarity. She even provided locations where some of the bodies had been dumped. But the investigation also uncovered that Wuornos had stolen from the victims, something that didn't line up with her self-defense claims. police were convinced that her motives were driven by greed as much as fear. The stolen items, combined with the brutality of the killings, painted a different picture of a woman who was not simply trying to protect herself, but a woman who had grown increasingly unhinged, acting out of pure rage. In January 1992, Aileen Wuornos was convicted of the murder of Richard Mallory, and the following month, she was sentenced to death. Over the next several years, Wuornos remained in prison, awaiting her fate. Her trial had captured the public's imagination. Some saw her as a victim, a woman pushed too far by years of abuse and trauma. Others saw her as a cold-blooded killer who had taken the lives of 7 men without remorse. Her case would be the subject of intense media scrutiny, with many questioning whether she had been given a fair trial. Wuornos' defense team, led by attorney Stephen Glazer, argued that she had been a victim of sexual assault and that she had killed in self-defense. But the prosecution countered that Wuornos had acted with premeditation, stealing from her victims and lying about the events leading to their deaths. In the years that followed, Aileen's case sparked debates about justice, mental illness, and the treatment of women in the criminal justice system. The public was divided. Some viewed her as a tragic figure, a victim of a broken system. Others saw her as a danger to society who deserved the death penalty. Wuornos' execution took place on October 9th, 2002, at Florida State Prison. She was put to death by lethal injection. Her last words were chilling. "I'd just like to say I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused. I'm sorry for everything that's happened." Her death sparked outrage in some quarters, and others were relieved that the monster had been executed. The media frenzy surrounding her life and death only intensified, with some likening her to a modern-day femme fatale, while others saw her as a tragic figure, abused and forgotten by society. Aileen Wuornos' story is a complicated one, full of contradiction and tragedy. She was a woman who, at the age of 33, had already endured a lifetime of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Some may argue that her crimes were the result of a broken system, a failure to protect her from the horrors of her past. Others, however, believe that she had crossed a line and her actions were beyond justification. The case of Aileen Wuornos raises difficult questions about the nature of justice and the way society views its most vulnerable members. Was she a victim of circumstance, or was she simply a killer who was able to hide behind her victimhood to escape accountability? Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers that can arise when the system fails to protect its most vulnerable citizens, and the complicated intersection between mental illness, trauma, and criminality. As we look back on her life and her tragic death, we are left with an unsettling truth, that the line between victim and villain can be disturbingly thin, and sometimes we never fully understand the forces that drive someone to commit unspeakable acts. In the end, the case of Aileen Wuornos is not just the story of a woman who killed 7 men. It is the story of a society that failed to protect her, of a justice system that couldn't reconcile her pain with her crime, and of a haunting legacy that continues to echo through the halls of criminal justice today. The case of Aileen Wuornos is a stark reminder of the importance of understanding the human experience, the pain, the trauma, and the choices that come with living in a world that often fails to protect its most vulnerable citizens. Whether viewed as a victim, a criminal, or a combination of both, Aileen's story continues to evoke powerful emotions and difficult questions about the criminal justice system, mental health, and societal responsibility. Aileen Wuornos, a complex story of pain, survival, and tragedy. a woman whose story continues to haunt, leaving us to ponder the forces that shape us and the choices we make in the darkest moments.